Hello, and welcome to the Good Dirt Podcast. We're so glad you're here. I'm Mary.
And I'm Emma, and together we are the mother daughter duo behind Lady Farmer, where we're all about cultivating a lifestyle that's simple, intentional, and connected to the rhythms of nature.
As we take a winter pause until spring, we're excited to share some of our favorite moments from the podcast with you. Think of it as a time to listen, reflect, and reconnect, like cozying up with an old friend.
Each week during this break, we'll be revisiting conversations that explore themes close to our hearts, like sustainable living, regenerative agriculture, and anything embracing slow living.
We also want to let you know about our Substack. If you're not already subscribed, it's a great way to stay in touch. You'll find thoughtful reflections, resources, and updates on what we're up to. You'll see it all there, but we'll be pausing paid subscriptions while we're on break.
Just a quick note, some details, especially in the introductions of these older episodes, might feel a little dated or like they're from a different season than the one that you're hearing them in. And if you hear references to retreats, our online community, the store, or sponsorships, or any other time sensitive offerings, keep in mind that they may not still apply. To stay up to date on everything, like we said, be sure to follow us on Instagram at We Are Lady Farmer and definitely subscribe to our Substack.
We hope these encore episodes spark inspiration for your journey toward a life that's more aligned with the earth and yourself. It's such a joy to share this space with you.
Thank you for being a part of this community. It's your presence and passion that keeps us grounded and growing. Now, let's get into it.
When I first moved out here and I was spending more time in nature than I ever had before in my life, and I was starting to feel changes on a physical, emotional, physiological level, I was just trying to figure out what was going on and trying to understand, is there language for this? And so I just started researching and I kept coming across this term called rewilding.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Emma and Mary Kingsley, the mother-daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now: the farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
All right. Welcome to the Good Dirt Podcast, everyone. Today's episode is really exciting. We're talking with someone who made a very intentional decision to change her living environment. Hillarie Maddox, who is known on Instagram by her handle Black Girl Country Living, spent over 11 years building a corporate career in learning and development and working for some of the biggest companies in the world. But in 2020, like many others, when her job went remote, she decided that she was finally ready for a slower, more intentional pace of life. And she and her family did it. They literally left the city to start a homestead in the country.
Yeah, and as you'll hear in this episode, living the slow life was more difficult than she imagined, but it forced her to align her life with her values, to redefine success in new ways, and to cut ties with an identity that she had spent years creating for herself. But Hillarie shares with us how, in time, she's rebuilt a life that is intentional, easeful, and is centered in her own core values.
We think you're going to love this conversation, and you're going to love hearing her story and how she helps other people now explore slow living through rewilding experiences and community building. She helps others make moves towards living more intentional lives. You can follow her on Instagram, subscribe to her newsletter on Substack, and look out for her upcoming rewilding workshops.
So here she is, Hillarie Maddox of Black Girl Country Living.
My name is Hillarie Maddox. I am the founder and creator of Black Girl Country Living and a writer, homesteader, and fairly new, I would say, to the slow living lifestyle, but really trying to be an educator in helping other folks, particularly BIPOC folks, understand that this life can be for anyone.
Awesome. And how did you get here?
Yeah, tell us a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah. So I guess I should start with I was born and raised in a rural state in the Midwest in South Dakota. And so a little bit of this is kind of in my blood, but I think that I always aspired to being in the city and living a fast life because I thought that that was what success looked like. And so that's what I decided to pursue. And I spent over a decade sort of climbing the traditional corporate ladder, and I worked in big tech most recently. And during the pandemic, my husband and I just had this realization that, we don't want to do this anymore. We were living in the city, living with his parents actually in his childhood home. And it was a really beautiful arrangement. We loved it. But I think during the pandemic, everything felt so small and cramped. So we were just ready to take a leap. And I knew I had this feeling early on that the shutdown and the working from home was going to last for a while. So we were able to find a house before the housing market kind of went absolutely bonkers.
Awesome.
And and so we left the city and bought a little bit over an acre of land on this little island off the coast of Washington. And we had the great fortune of making the transition from city living to country life very slowly. And looking back, I'm so grateful that we did because it's a really big leap. And it has just been a whirlwind of sort of like integrating into a new way of being and adjusting to a much slower pace of life and adjusting my expectations around what success should look like, I guess.
So you talk about a new way of being. Can you talk
hmm
about some maybe specific examples of that and how that like as you immersed yourself in this, what are the things that came up for you that felt like the real shift?
When I think of a new way of being, it really comes down to, for me, learning to live with nature, kind of in alignment with natural rhythms of life. I think I realized very quickly after moving out here a lot of the expectation I had in living in the city was kind of fabricated. Things like the expectation to have like food, certain kinds of food year round, all the time from around the world. This expectation to have things delivered to you super quickly, anything you want, anytime you want. There's just so much, very high expectations of how the world should exist that I was confronted with. Expectations too around just what happens after we consume things. And there's a lot of things that are made invisible when you live in the city after you, like your waste, basically. Things get hauled off and hauled away, and you don't have to think about how much recycling you have or how much garbage you created. It's just invisible, or where your water comes from, what you put down the drain. And I think all of those things just started to help me understand that we have to live in a way that enables our environment to exist, I guess. And we have to be kind of in alignment with this space that we're living in if we want to sustain it. So for me, that looked like really having to face a lot of my consumption habits, having to be much more conscientious of the kinds of food I'm consuming, when I'm consuming it. And I'm just much more aware of what is essential in life and what is non essential.
I really love what you said that when you live in the city, so many things are made invisible. And I think lack of transparency in our modern life is
such an issue. And one of the big reasons that we are, where we are today, facing all the issues on the planet and in the environment and so forth, because in the name of civilization, we've created wonderful solutions to all these things to our credit
Mm-hmm.
as ingenious human beings. You know, what to do with our waste and how to have water turning on in the house. And you don't have to wonder where it
Mm-hmm.
comes from and all of those things. And I think more and more now, people like you are waking up to the fact that that lack of transparency also translates into a disconnection. And when
Mm-hmm.
we're disconnected, we start what? Help me fill in the blank here. Taking it for granted?
I think when we're
Yeah.
disconnected, that's when we start feeling like we have to buy stuff.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that's part of our consumer addiction is to fill. We're disconnected. There's something missing. So we feel like we have to fill that with other stuff.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. And I think for me, it also is the feeling disconnected also means we exploit
Yeah.
and we take advantage because we just don't understand the impact that we're having. And even if we're trying to be thoughtful and intentional, and I should say, even for me, when I thought I was being, doing the right thing sometimes and buying sustainably, and I think that there's just the lack of awareness that what I was creating or what I was consuming more and consuming something that says that is sustainable does not ultimately equal, you're doing right by this earth. And I think that I just had a wake up moment when we tried, not intentionally, but we just tried to pick up our life in the city and move it out here. We basically just rerouted all of our Amazon packages and we're just like, we'll just keep living the same way. And without realizing, oh my God, we have to figure out what we're going to do with all this recycling. And it was embarrassing to see how much stuff we were consuming and having to figure out, what are we going to do with all of this? And recognizing that, my God, by city standards, this isn't crazy what I'm doing. But when you have to really start to face, now I have to be the one responsible for this, it really makes you think differently.
Yes. A great example of that is the issue of food waste. And we talk about that so much on here because it's such a big issue, and it comes up so much in this space. Is once you understand that it's not a good thing to throw your food waste in the trash because it doesn't decompose, and we say that all the time and try to spread the word, folks. It's harmful. It's harmful in the landfills. So we need to do something else with it. And once you start that process, I realize how much food waste or scraps, you can use either word, I guess, are created in my very own household with just myself and my husband. We have become disconnected by what becomes of our waste, including our food waste. And
Yeah.
your eyes are opened with each little step you take. Your eyes are open. It's like peeling an onion. You just keep peeling and peeling and peeling, and it opens up more questions and needs for changes of habit and behavior. And it's a process. It truly is. How long have you been? Has it been
Yeah.
since you made this shift?
A little bit over 2 years. I think your analogy of being an onion is so on point.
Yeah.
There's so many things that I think that, we're doing the right thing and we're on the right track. And I think that that's what it has to be. You just have to be kind of on the right track and moving forward, because there's never going to be an arrival, I don't think. But yeah, there's just always something more that we're recognizing that we could do differently. And the food waste was huge because I used to aspire to cook all of these fancy meals in the city. And because we had access to grocery stores that had unlimited amounts of food from all around the world, and would never get around to it, and there was something that gets thrown away, and then you just you move on. But I think once we were here, and consuming food differently, consuming less food and less variety of food. We no longer had a compost. It started to become really apparent and really painful every time we had to throw out food. And it kind of started to spiral into like, oh my gosh, like how much are we spending on this wasted food? And, is there somewhere we could put this wasted food? And we now have ducts where we give a lot of our food scraps to, or we make, what is it, kitchen sink broth, I guess, with all the odds and ends of the vegetables
Yeah.
and vegetable broth. So yeah, it is really like you start someplace and you have to keep unpeeling and unpeeling, and there's never doesn't feel like an arrival.
Oh, this is so true.
So you just talked a little bit about the transition, and I guess you might have mentioned at the beginning, but I wonder, was there a real like aha moment, maybe even before kind of the pandemic when you realized things were getting small? Because that's a huge life change to be like, we're gonna move out to the country and live a completely different life. Was it slowly, gradually over time? Or what was, I would say, the sort of the crux of the change for you, kind of to make you make the decision?
Yeah. There had been a lot of dreaming of this life. I think for a long time, my husband and I have a dream board, a vision board, and many years ago, before we had our first kiddo, we started this, and there were pictures of like a house that was out somewhere that was definitely not in a city.
Aw.
It was
Oh,
surrounded by trees, and we had no idea where it was or how we could ever be there. And because we were both firmly in this world of, pursuing our corporate careers, and we had no idea how it was ever going to happen. But I think we both always had this yearning, as I think many people do, for something just slower and more intentional. And I think it also, during the pandemic, like the murder of George Floyd, and just realizing like we didn't feel like there were a lot of spaces that we really truly felt really safe and accepted. And I think we wanted to create a space of our own that really felt like we could kind of escape to, and be a little bit removed from the tension that was going on and sort of boiling over in the city.
Mm,
hmm,
So in some ways we had prepared for it, and in other ways I think we were just like, you know what, we don't care what happens, we just need to be out of here.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's a little like you had planted the seeds,
Yeah,
right? And then it was whoop, time to harvest.
exactly.
those vision boards are really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've certainly done them in the past, and we've done them as a community. And you can have something on there that makes no sense. It's not
Hmm.
logical. You don't know what in the world that image is, and then it can be a few years later that you look at that and you go, "Oh my gosh, that's what that
Hmm.
was."
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been shocked at the kind of things that we're like, we had no idea how that was going to come into being. And there have been periods where we didn't look at it for a year,
Mhm.
and in we take it out again and we're like, wow, we've made that happen, that somehow is existing. And it's kind of scary almost the way that it can
Hmm.
happen. But we've really leaned into it, and I think just use it as a space for us to keep dreaming about how we want to continue to lean into this life, but also share it with more people, because I think that the more opportunities people have to just experience, to dip their toe in, to understand, you know, it's definitely a transition. It's definitely not easy, but there's real value in, I think, coming back to a slower pace of living.
100%.
Yes, 100%. And we often say that that intention or that shift does not necessarily have to take place with a move
Hmm.
to the country. It can take place on all kinds of levels,
Totally.
because I think, and what you certainly described here, is it's an internal thing. You
Hmm.
start waking up, you start noticing, you start changing your behavior, not because you're checking boxes, because it feels like the thing to do, and it feels good, and it feels better, and it urges you on to the next thing to do differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many ways that can happen in the city, in the country, in the suburbs, or wherever you are. But you are out, that's your reality now, and you have some space, you have an acre. You say a little over an acre. I think that's what you said.
Yeah. Yep.
So tell us what you're doing there and how you spend your time and how you share it. I know you have a beautiful sharing on social media, and just talk about that a little bit, and your purpose and mission there.
Yeah. So the space that we have is sort of a long, narrow piece of land that slants down, and we're on an island. So we face out onto the water. And
Mm.
the front half of our yard is sort of landscaped, just grass. And we're kind of trying to just let it be and bring in back as many native plants as we can. And the back half is forested, and it's a really cool space because we have eagles, owls, elk, deer, all kinds of birds. It's really incredible. And my first, the first thing I wanted to do was just learn how to garden. I had been living with my father-in-law, who owns a landscape gardening business, and just had been watching him for the time that we lived at their house. And just the way that he moved through the garden and just knew what the plants needed, and just had an awareness of what was going to happen at any given season. And because we're in the Pacific Northwest, things can grow throughout the entire year. And I so admired the orchestration he had going on in his garden. There was just always something that was in bloom, that was going to fruit and flowering. And then he always had something interesting that he was growing in the vegetable garden. So I was excited to try my hand at this and see if I could learn to read plants the way that he did. So my first year, I planted 2 raised beds, and that was more than enough for my first season.
Mm-hmm.
And it was addicting because I got to harvest, it was like some squash, tomatoes, and some lettuces. And it was just so life-giving to be able to walk out there with my kiddo and see him pick things off and eat something, in the excitement. And I knew I wanted to do more. And this last year I expanded to many raised beds and then an in-ground garden, and realized quickly that I was in over my head, and I had planted all these things and I didn't know sort of the right timing for when I should get things in the ground. We were also having just a crazy season. So how I should be maintaining them when they needed to be harvested. And so I went out and found myself some homestead and farming mentors, and they were just so generous in sharing their wisdom and allowing me to just watch them move through their spaces and understand what growing food looked like on a few different scales. One was a market gardener, and she does CSA boxes for about a dozen families and everything. She has a little bit less space than I do, so she just, that was kind of reflective of where I would like to be. And then another woman who I mentored with had a farm, and just allowed me to come out and be with her once a week while she planted, harvested, anything. I just wanted to understand more about what plants did, I guess. And I had this realization, this kind of aha moment, when I had a friend out here and gave him a radish from the ground. And he was like, "Oh my God, like I didn't know that you could just pick food from the ground and eat it." And and then after he ate the radish and he like was filming himself do this, I told him, just throw the radish top back on the garden and it'll decompose and its nutrients for the bed. And his mind was just blown. And he's like, "This is crazy." And I have a background in education, corporate education, and I really am passionate about creating just fun experiences for people. And that was just a moment for me of like, whoa, I could turn this into an experience that allows people to really understand that this lifestyle is attainable in a lot of different ways. It's not just about buying a piece of land, but also help people just to be more in touch with nature and help people understand that we are a part of nature, and there's something just really life-giving about having a space where you can explore that and be unashamed of just the wonder that comes with not knowing that certain things come from the ground. And it's, I think, just a really kind of special space to be in. So that's what I'm currently pursuing, is creating more experiences for people to have that sense of wonder.
So, have you had a chance yet to host some events, or have you been doing online teaching? How have you, what does that look like so far? Or is it still in the developing stage? You haven't been there very long.
Yeah. So over the summer, I had some really great opportunities I connected with our local farmers market, and they just let me set up an educational booth. There wasn't a very high barrier, fortunately. And I just wanted to see what people were interested in. So I set up an education booth. I did how to make jams. I did intro to homesteading. I did bouquet making, and each time would feature different products from other farmers who were represented at the market. And just wanted to get people's interest peaked around what they could do, because I think a lot of times what stops people, and in particular, this I was focused on like seasonal eating and doing things with the seasons. I think what stops people is just like a fear of knowing what to do with the food, or feeling like they're going to do something wrong in making a bouquet or something. And I just wanted to provide a really accessible way for people to just be hands-on and show them how simple it is to do, to work with food and work with flowers. And that sort of evolved into wanting to help people on a deeper level to, I guess it sort of becomes more spiritual, I guess, for me, and understanding the deeper connection to the earth. So beyond just eating food, beyond just growing food, understanding that we are all interconnected. And I think that that is sort of the next thing I am pursuing and in the process of creating is I'm calling them rewilding workshops, where I really get to help people explore, and in particular BIPOC folks, what it means to be with nature and develop a relationship with nature, and have activities around sort of joy and rest in the presence of nature. So that is what I'm hoping to launch early next year.
Oh, this sounds wonderful. You've really hit the ground running,
Yeah.
you know, um, on reaching out and, arms open wide and inviting people into the fold.
That's really beautiful and awesome. And how you are, how like my mom was saying, how you're connecting all these different um, aspects and the different farmers and showcasing their work and really building community, I guess, is what's really cool and inspiring about what you're doing. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about your perspective as a Black woman in this space. And I think it's really amazing that part of your mission is to reach out in particular to BIPOC folks as well. But um, at least in my experience, from what I see, the sustainability, slow living country farm life is mostly white from what I can see. And I get very inspired and excited when there are other voices in the space. And so I'd just love to hear your perspective on that and your observations.
Yeah. So I think one of the first things that started that really stuck out for me as well, when I first got on Instagram last year and was just sharing photos of my garden, and I got messages from some women who were like, "Oh my gosh, it's crazy to see a Black girl doing this." And I was just like, what? And
Why? Yeah.
and it's true though. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, there's no reason why we can't do this. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we're not, just in terms of like historical access and who gets access to outdoor spaces and who has the time to do these kinds of things. And I think that the deeper I've gotten into this community, the more people of color I see doing really incredible, impressive work in this space. And it is so inspiring because I think we have to be able to see ourselves reflected in these kinds of lifestyles in order to know that it's okay for us to pursue. And part of what I want people to see in the work that I'm doing is that there's many ways to pursue slow living lifestyle. It doesn't mean that you have to, it doesn't mean that you have to have like a full scale farm. It doesn't mean that you even have to leave the city. Like there's just a lot of things that you can do to work on being on a journey to a slower pace of life. And Mary, something you said earlier about this being sort of an internal journey. I couldn't agree more. I think that there's so much of what we have to do to enjoy a slow lifestyle that is internal work. So before you even, have the farm, have the chickens, whatever it might be for you, it is really understanding that it's adjusting your perspective and seeing things in a way that allows you to be present. Because I think that when we sort of fantasize about a slow lifestyle or the what is the trendy sort of name? Oh, cottagecore. There's just, I think the deeper sentiment is that we want to have like a slow presence and a connection. And I think that's what the slow life represents. But I think that there's a lot of ways that we can do that without having to just abandon our current lives.
Oh, that's so well put. And there are a couple of things here that I want to circle back to. One of them is the term homesteading, and it's the original version of homesteading, in our American history.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, in large part, it was a white colonial thing for pioneers to get their 40 acres and a mule and,
And
go
exploit whoever they had
and
to
just
get their
claim the land, whoever it belonged to before that. So that's that's a little bit scary thing when we reflect back on it in that way. And now we use the term homesteading, I think, in a very different way. And I love not only the fact that you are a BIPOC voice coming forward to embrace certain aspects of homesteading, but you're also including the community. And I love the way that you said you felt like you needed some instruction and guidance in your garden. So you went and you sought out homesteading mentors. And so, what do you think of with the word homesteading? How do you explain homesteading?
Oh man, I love that you asked this question because my family actually owns several original homesteads in South Dakota. And so
when you say original, you mean like from the Western Border Expansion?
Yeah, from Homestead Act homesteads.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they're
still there.
They're still there. Mm-hmm. So 160-acre parcel allotments. And they were basically given to any mostly European settlers who would improve the land and stay on it for 5 years. And it would cost a filing fee. So I think my family paid maybe like $20 or something like that for 160 acres. And so this is my mother's, both her maternal and paternal grandparents had a homestead just a mile down the street. And so I grew up going to visit them on the homesteads and going kind of bouncing back and forth between the two farms. And one of them still had an original one-room schoolhouse where my grandma taught school. And underground root cellar. There were old dilapidated barns that were original from when the homestead was established. And now my aunt and uncle live on. They've built a new home, but they've been in the family for decades. And one of the things that I saw growing up was just how much community it required to sustain those farms. And I think that was sort of the mentality with which I wanted to approach my homesteading. We got to go out there at different times of the year where they might be harvesting. They had festivals around different times of the seasons. And it always felt like community was coming out to help one another, whether it was like, we don't have a baler or our baler's broken. Can I use yours? Or, we have to haul beans. Can we get all hands on deck to help out with so-and-so's farm? And to me, I felt an overwhelming sense of community that was needed in order to make those farms work. And that was a lot of land. And 160 acres by today's standards, compared to like factory farms, is not a lot of land. But by having to basically maintain that on your own is a lot of work. Yeah,
Absolutely. And where you're, so how far back did that go?
they were original. Early, I think late 1800s, early 1900s. And it's funny that I'm actually working with my mom now on planning our family reunion. And we're having to dig up some of these stories. Her family is German and Scottish. I'm biracial, by the way. So my mom is white, my dad is Black. So we're having to dig up a lot of these stories, and a lot of this is like, oh my God, I had no idea. I know that they owned, these large lots of land, but I didn't know until a few months ago that this was like original homestead land.
That's so special, Hillarie.
Yeah, it really is. It's
that you have like access to that information, and that you still have it in the family.
Yeah. It's really remarkable.
Rare.
Yeah.
Rare. I've never. You might be the first person I've ever met that
Is still connected.
has family land that goes back to the original homestead.
And I guess
act.
I had assumed, maybe this is just from like movies and stuff, but I guess I had assumed that a lot of them weren't around anymore even.
Well, they got taken away from people or sold off and
or like blown away in the Dust Bowl. I don't know.
A lot of them, I mean, there's a lot of farmers who didn't last because especially out in the plains, the weather was just so harsh. It was hard for a lot of people to get established. But I think in more recent years, in more recent decades, probably, a lot of them have been just bought out because it's just not real sustainable to be a small farmer like that. And like I said, 160 acres is a lot, but by industrial farming standards, it's very little. So you're kind of a little man. And yeah, it's tough to be out there doing, especially in this moment where we're dealing with so much uncertainty and climate change. It's really tough to be able to really put your bet on a few crops and see what happens as a small farmer.
And so your family who's farming right now, what's their operation like?
They do a lot of soybeans And so I have my cousin still farming. She's my age, and she has some young kids who want to take over the family business. And I have my aunt and uncle who are still out on at my grandparents' house, and they're basically done. So we don't know what's going to happen to that's 3 farms, and we're not quite sure what's going to happen. And I really want to have a conversation with them, but it's also, I recognize that it's a lot of legacy riding on very few people who have the capacity and the resources to carry it on.
Your description there of what might have happened to so many of the original homesteads, um, it's perfectly reflective of what has happened over the last century in farming. That
Mm,
120 years ago, the country was just full of small allotments like that, diversified, that grew a number of crops, um, and had their made their living through various channels. And then slowly, particularly after the world wars, it just became taken over by non-diversified farms, commodity farms. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of acres
yeah,
uh, owned by just a very few. So
yeah,
it's very, very different picture in agriculture than it was.
Well, and what's interesting about that, I think, is that that was unsustainable in a lot of ways, probably the many, many small farms. And what's currently happening, fewer big farms, is unsustainable.
yeah.
And it seems like
Struggling.
we're in constant wondering how to make this work. I mean, because I think in some corners of this world, there are people who, small farms is everything. That's the answer. But when we really look at it in this historical
Hmm.
way, the small farms everywhere didn't
Mm.
exactly work either. So I don't
You
know.
know,
Yeah.
I think that makes me think of Wendell Berry, his book
Hmm.
Unsettling of America. He talks about
Yes.
Mm,
um, what all of those people who worked in agriculture were freed up to do, and that so many of our jobs now are just sort of created to create a lot of busy work. And I think there was sort of this perception that having to work the land and work to grow your own food is somehow less than. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, and now we're at this moment of, I think, real crisis of recognizing that the food systems and the pathways that we have right now are just not sustainable. And you're right, Emma, small scale farmers are not sustainable, but like, how do we help people start to return to a place where we can start to make food more accessible and affordable? Because yeah, what's happening right now in the world is kind of, it's scary. And I think a lot of people need to start to think about finding their way back to being able to grow some of their own food.
While you were talking, it just occurred to me. This just popped into my head that the expression hand to mouth, like you're living hand to mouth,
Mm,
is is kind of a, oh, that's so sad. They're living hand to mouth, but um what it means is, you think of farmers and you think of, early American homesteads and family farms, and you were working to put food on the table. It was hand to mouth.
yeah.
But that's gotten to be like almost like a pejorative. Is that the word for it? Or framed as an unfortunate thing. Like you're
Hmm.
not successful, or you're
mhm.
not, you're not thriving. Thriving, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? I think in the modern sense of the term, it means like you're working super hard just so you can eat,
Mm,
and that's not a good way to be. But as opposed to like you're growing your own food and you have abundance by
yeah.
your own hand. It's like it's
Yeah.
just a
Mm.
different way of looking at it. and it does reflect, I think, how our
Yeah.
culture has changed so much.
In so many ways, I think we are in this moment of people where so many people are still living hand to mouth. It's just that we don't have the skills to be able to control where our food comes from. And so, all of your paycheck is going to buy food that, came from factories. And, we're putting in all of this, all of our effort and energy is just going back into the essentials. So where have we really gotten?
So interesting. Yeah, the food, there's a paywall for the food now. And we've evolved to this in the name of civilization. So you use the word rewilding, and that's a word we're hearing more and more of lately. And I'm just curious, what does it mean to you, and how would you say rewilding is being expressed in your current life?
Yeah, I see it more and more too. Um, I think for me, when I first moved out here and I was spending more time in nature than I ever had before in my life, and I was starting to feel like changes on a physical, emotional, physiological level, I was just trying to figure out what was going on and trying to understand, is there language for this? Like I don't know what I'm experiencing. And so I just started researching, and I kept coming across this term mostly in ecology research called rewilding. And I checked out some books from the library and was just very curious about this idea of basically returning something to a natural state, of creating a natural and sustainable balance in a place. And for me, it just really resonated because I felt like that was kind of what was happening in my body. And it was just this extreme of going from, this sort of this highly sort of manicured space of being in like modern life to being in the space where it was very quiet and still, and there just weren't all of these extra inputs happening. It was just natural beauty. And for me, I just liked that it meant sort of this opportunity to come back to myself, to learn to sort of live within my own means, to, I think, in a very real way, escape this idea of perfectionism and everything having to be perfectly manicured, and, letting things be wild, letting myself be who I wanted to be, without the pressure of things having to be as we want them to be, I think, in the natural world. So that is kind of how I embraced the idea.
Yeah, and just again, it's kind of another unpacking thing, another onion thing, um, to where once you let one little bit of that in, it
Mhm.
grows, I think.
I think it just, for me, just expressed um, a coming home, I guess, of like our humanity, of needing to return to our origins and our roots. And it just felt for me at that moment like I just needed a word to like grab, and it's continued to feel like a word that captures in essence what I'm trying to do and what I want to help other people do as well.
I find it a very exciting word.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I want to get rewilded.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the word, and it means a lot to me personally as well. And to me, it points to becoming aware of, in a very practical sense, like screen
Mm,
time, and when can I choose to be outdoors and be in nature as opposed to doing something that I might have been doing like 20 years ago, maybe running
mm.
errands. It's all part of that for me, like making decisions about what I do during the day. I don't exactly go, oh, I'm going to rewild today. It's not like that. It's just sort of, it's just sort of a state
Yeah.
of mind of choosing certain things over others. So I think it's a wonderful word. I actually love it, and it's just interesting to see what people do with all this new
Agreed.
information.
Agreed.
Have you done any work or research or know anything about the indigenous people of that area? I imagine in those kind of more remote island places, um, I just imagine there being a really strong tie to the indigenous cultures. I would hope so, but is that
Very
true?
true. Very true.
Okay, good.
And so the land that we're on is Coast Salish more generally. And then there was a specific tribe that was native to the land that I'm on called Lower Skagit tribe. And this is the Pacific Northwest is truly a place of abundance. And so there was just food everywhere. And so a lot of the Native American tribes kind of moved around in circles. And I should say, like, I'm still learning a lot of this for myself, and I'm really trying to understand. But as I understand, there was just a lot of movement of the tribes throughout this region seasonally, and so there was a lot of different tribes that would come to this island throughout the year, Whidbey Island, and it was a place of like community and exchange and conversation. And so I think that there's a lot of that spirit here today still, and I think that a lot of what I'm trying to do is to try and capture some of that and try and make this a place where we can continue to have important conversations and big conversations, and challenge our ideas about what it means to be belong to a place, and understand more about telling a whole history of a place. And even though it's difficult and it's uncomfortable, I think it's a really important thing that we continue to do.
Isn't that so amazing that that culture and low life was built around moving with the seasons and the changes in the landscape
Yeah.
as opposed to staying stationary and sort of commanding that it do what you want
Oh
it
my
to.
gosh. Yeah.
Um, it's so fascinating and it's interesting because I feel like it's not like we can just go back to being nomads. Um, and there's so many amazing things about being stationary and learning to work with the land that you're on. But I wonder sort of what that looks like moving forward. And it seems sort of wonderful to be able to, oh my gosh, the first this is like how sick we are. My first thought is like to have no stuff, to have to look around, like just like go and like
Yeah.
Yeah.
catch a fish for
Well,
dinner. I don't know.
Yes.
that's the story of agriculture, though.
Yeah.
That's the story. We started staying in one place and setting down roots and collecting things, and it's fascinating when you go back and read about all that. How humans started spacing their children closer together and having more children at the advent of agriculture, because in the nomadic lifestyle, um, you
Mm.
couldn't have like three children that weren't walking, or a toddler and two and a baby and a newborn, and move around as well. So there was sort of this natural family planning and spacing,
Wow.
and so there was a natural sort of population control. It is so fascinating.
Well,
There's so many books that sort of put all this into perspective that I've enjoyed so much lately. But yeah, we started accumulating things basically when we decided to stay in one place and grow our own food.
I like what you said, collecting things, because it's
Yeah.
so true. It's so true. I think that we've got an attachment to our belongings, and it is such a collection of just things. And I think that part of this lifestyle is just becoming much more aware of my
Yes.
sort of inclination to just collect because I can collect, and trying to work against that and figuring out, what do I actually need, and what am I just holding on to because it feels important.
Oh, yes.
I think that's a great segue to the next question we are going to ask, which was, what are some of your biggest challenges in making this shift?
Oh, man. There have been a lot of challenges. I think I talked a little bit earlier about just facing our consumption. That's continues to be a real challenge. Um, and I think managing our expectations about what this life could be, should be, what we want it to be. Um, I think it's so easy to get caught up in, when we first moved out here, we got a stack of like hobby farm magazines and just different sort of slow living lifestyle magazines. And the pictures are all pristine and, they've got a full operation going, and coming to the realization that all of that requires not only a lot of work, but a lot of knowledge and understanding and wisdom. And the truth is that our decision and our ancestors' decision to step away from this lifestyle is that we've lost so much of that wisdom. And just like, we go to college and it takes many years to understand a particular subject and topic, stepping back into this way of living is also a practice and a study that we can't just expect to just, it's not a pop-up tent. We shouldn't just go out and buy chickens just because everybody else who homesteads has chickens. There's so much about this life that I think has to be adapted to what our actual needs are. And it really takes time to even getting down to the basics of understanding needs versus wants. So that has been a real challenge of this whole adventure.
That's the big one. That's it.
And conversely, what would you say have been your biggest rewards?
So I think the reward has really been in finding joy in really simple ways. And it's both sort of an internal joy, but also realizing that in order to find joy in my day to day and find entertainment, like there's nothing you have to buy to do that kind of stuff. And coming to the realization that joy is like in so many parts of our life, we just have to be willing to be patient and look for it or cultivate it, has been an incredible reward. It's also been rewarding just getting to know myself and my family on a deeper level. I think that in the city, there's so many distractions and so much interference when it comes to actually understanding ourselves and understanding the people we love, that this has been just an incredible opportunity to understand myself and what makes me happy, what excites me, understand, how I can learn things and what's challenging for me and overcome challenges, and getting to see that in my family as well. So for all the things that have really, really been tough, I'm so grateful for, because I think it's allowed us to find joy in places that we never expected.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It occurred to me that I missed out on, like, did you guys give up your jobs, or do you work from where you are, or are you still going out? I mean, what has changed in that aspect, the work aspect of your
Yeah.
life?
So for work, both of our jobs went remote. We were both in the tech industry, and
Hmm.
I was the first summer that I was out here, I was on maternity leave with my second kiddo and just sat on the deck
Mm.
for a lot of that, just nursing him, hung out. And I just told myself on several occasions, I just want to figure out a way to make this lifestyle my main focus. And I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that it was just so beautiful being able to spend time outdoors and being able to invest in things that were really life-giving, that I didn't want to sit in front of a computer screen all day. And so fast forward to earlier this summer, I decided to quit my job, and and it happened really quickly. And I think we were all a little bit surprised, but I'm just kind of figuring it out. And I think
Yeah.
part of this shift has been learning to live within our own means financially as well. And by doing so, we've been able to reduce our costs significantly. And I'm still working on what does it mean to start a business within the realm of this lifestyle. And my background is in education and like executive education and events. And so I'm parlaying that into doing events and experiences for people in nature. And it's really intimidating to say, like, I want to step away from something that feels so guaranteed and established and try and figure out something on my own. But it is also incredibly, it's really, I guess, life-giving to be able to say that I know I can figure this out on my own, and I don't want to continue to give my talents and gifts to corporations. And I want to instead find a way to help other people find their way back to this way of living.
Yeah. It seems like this time for you, the way that I hear you talk about where you are and sort of where you want to go, it feels very not like not literally, but it feels like very pregnant
Mm,
for you. Like you have things like cooking and you're sort of
Yeah.
gestating this new way of being. It's very exciting.
I love that description. There's so much creativity that's come out of just being in this space. And I mentioned earlier, like, it's a very interesting physiological shift, I think, to be present with nature, and just to recognize that there is such a gift that you have in being able to reconnect with a source of creativity that I never knew that I was missing out on.
Yes. And then that makes me mad because there's so many people that don't know what they're missing
Oh,
out on, you
so
know?
so many people, totally.
So, Hillary, you've probably answered this question many times over, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What does slow living mean to you? How would you talk about that to others?
Yeah, I think for me it is um, being present and being intentional. And it's like a practice. It is an ongoing practice of just being conscientious of how I'm moving through the day. And it is like this cyclical thing of revisiting. You know, we have cycles on many different levels, and I think continuously thinking about how am I affecting myself as I'm moving through the day? How are my decisions affecting myself? How are they affecting other people? And just being intentional about what I'm doing, what I'm eating, who I'm spending time with, um, how I'm choosing to consume things. And a big part of slow living for me has been being conscientious about the kind of media I'm consuming, whether it's books, TV, movies, podcasts, um, and just trying to live more thoughtfully in awareness that everything I do has a ripple effect, whether it's internally or externally, and that if I can sort of slow down and be a more aware, then I think I can have a different kind of impact than I was having previously.
Thank you very
I
much.
love that answer.
That is the correct answer.
Yeah, that's right.
That's so
Just
funny.
kidding. Everybody has their own interpretation.
You got it right.
Awesome.
What does the good dirt mean to you?
Oh my gosh. So, my just a few weeks ago, I was cleaning out some garden beds, some raised beds, and after a summer of doing gardening classes at my son's preschool, my son was hanging out with me and sort of digging up some old tomatoes and stuff, and he was like, "Mommy, is this good dirt?" And I first of all was so excited that he had been even paying attention to what I'd been talking about all summer. And I asked him, what is good dirt?" And he said, "It means it's alive." And
Oh,
and I
I'm gonna cry.
I mean, yeah, I was profoundly moved that he like was witnessing and like was able to articulate what the difference between what was in our garden and, a pile of dirt sitting on our driveway. And I think good dirt is just that. It is alive. It is both literally and metaphorically. It is the foundation of everything. It is what we go back to. And it is like the essence of everything. Yeah.
Mm, so good.
that's amazing. Oh my goodness. I love it so much that your child gets
Yeah.
that. I that gives me hope for the world.
Yeah. I know. And it's
Uh,
hard. I went over to his class every Friday, and I felt like some days I was just talking to myself, reading him books about gardening and soil. And it felt so good that he was paying attention and that it meant something to him. So
oh,
I agree. It gives me hope too.
that's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, Emma, you want to wind it up?
Sure. As we wrap up here, um, we like to ask if there's anything else that you would like people to understand about the work that you're doing.
Or anything else you want to talk about that we didn't touch on?
Um, I think maybe in terms of just the work that I'm doing, hope that people really take time to understand that nature is what brings us back to ourselves, and just the importance of having greater access for more people to the outdoors, and being able to form different kinds of relationship with nature, I think is really important. And I think this was something that I have recently learned too, is just when we think about always having to be in nature and not being with nature, I think it confuses the kind of relationships we can have, and it sort of elevates us above nature. And I think allowing more space to see ourselves as a part of nature instead of something separate from it is super important.
Oh, agree 100%. And it reminds us that, um, yeah, when we talk about that relationship, we talk about being, even when we say we are connected to nature, that's even setting up this duality that really doesn't exist. That's just in our minds. So I think that's what you're getting at, and I really hear that. So it's experiencing that there is no separation. There's no us and
Yeah,
them or us and it. It just we're all
we're
there.
all there.
And that is a learning. It's a state of mind. It has to come from within, I think. And I think it comes from experiencing some of these things we've been talking about this whole
Yeah,
hour. Some of these experiences that come from peeling the onion, and then you really start to get it. And so, yeah, thank you for expressing that so beautifully.
yeah. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate this.
Oh my gosh. This has been so lovely. I can't wait to come to Whidbey Island and visit you.
Yes. Yeah.
We have a lot of people that visit
I
here.
know. Can you tell the audience where they can find you and follow you and how they can keep up to updated with all these awesome workshops you're going to be doing?
Yeah. So you can check out my work on Instagram or Substack, Black Girl Country Living. I've got a weekly newsletter that I put out, and I will be sharing updates about the workshops through my newsletter and on Instagram.
Are these going to be in-person workshops or Zoom workshops or both?
In person, but I really hope to be able to expand past in person and make them more accessible. I heard from a lot of folks that they were like, I would love to do something like this. And I think there's a way.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool. It certainly is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I've enjoyed this so very, very much. You speak our
Yes.
language.
Thank you. This has been so awesome. Thank you for inviting me on. And just, again, being able to be part of a mother-daughter dynamic is so fun.
Oh, my goodness. Well, welcome.
Yeah, welcome. And just, again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in the link in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer with original music composed and performed by John Kingsley. Our technical partner for this series is Citizen Racecar. Post-production by Alex Brower and Jose Miguel Baez, coordinated by Gabriela Montequin.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at We Are Lady Farmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.